The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. when I heard Maren's key fumble in the front door lock. I'd been lying there for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, listening to the house settle around me like a ship taking on water. The irony wasn't lost on me. An electrical contractor who'd spent 15 years wiring other people's homes for happiness, only to watch his own circuits fail one by one. "Trent?" Maren's voice drifted up the stairs, artificially bright despite the hour. "Are you awake?" I rolled over, squinting at the doorway where she appeared, still in her black cocktail dress from what she'd called a work function. Her lipstick was gone, her hair disheveled in a way that suggested more than just a long evening of networking. The scent of cologne, not mine, clung to her like evidence. "So," I said, my voice rough with exhaustion and something darker, "did you at least let him buy you dinner first?" The question hung in the air between us like a live wire. Maren's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, then something that looked almost like relief. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope, tossing it onto the bed with the casual indifference of someone discarding trash. "Divorce papers," she said simply. "I want everything. The house, the business assets, the savings accounts. Everything except custody of Emma and Jake. You can have them." I sat up slowly, my mind processing what she'd just said. 22 years together, 8 years married, 2 kids, and she was offering to walk away from our children like they were furniture she didn't want to move. "Hope he likes leftovers," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Maren's eyes flashed. "His name is Eli Bowers. You remember him? We dated before you and I got together. He's got his own real estate development company now. Very successful." The name hit me like touching a hot wire. Eli Bowers. The same guy who'd made Maren's life miserable during their 2-year relationship in college, the one she'd cried about for months after their breakup. The same guy she'd sworn she never wanted to see again. "Let me guess," I continued, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. "He's got the penthouse condo downtown, the one with the parking garage that requires a special access card to enter. The one where you've been spending your evenings?" Her face went pale. "How did you—" "Your parking app, Maren. It sends location pings to the family account. Has been for months." I stood up, moving to the dresser where I'd been collecting evidence without even realizing it. "Every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Some Saturdays when you said you were visiting your sister." She lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm moving in with him tomorrow. The papers are already filed. My lawyer says it's a straightforward case since we're in agreement about the division of assets." "Straightforward," I repeated, tasting the word. "That's one way to put it. Don't make this harder than it has to be, Trent. We both know this marriage has been over for a long time." I looked at her standing there in our bedroom doorway, already mentally moved out, already planning her new life with her old boyfriend. Something cold and methodical settled in my chest. Not anger exactly, but something more dangerous. The same focused calm I felt when I was troubleshooting a complex electrical problem. "You're right," I said finally. "This has been over for a long time. I just didn't realize how over." She seemed surprised by my easy agreement. "So you'll sign the papers?" "Oh, I'll sign them," I said, picking up the envelope. "But first, I think we need to have a conversation about what everything actually means." Maren frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means, sweetheart, that you might want to read the fine print before you start packing, because where you're going, you won't need much." I watched her face as my words sank in, saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross her features. She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking past her toward the stairs. "Get some sleep, Maren. You're going to need it." The next morning arrived gray and bitter, matching my mood as I drove to Ardell Electric's headquarters. The building sat on the industrial side of town, a converted warehouse that I'd bought and renovated 5 years ago when the business finally started turning real profit. The sign out front, "Ardell Electric, powering your future." Since 2009, felt like a cruel joke now. Doug Becker was already there when I pulled into the parking lot, his massive frame hunched over the hood of his pickup truck, steam rising from a coffee cup balanced on the bumper. At 52, Doug had the weathered look of a man who'd spent 30 years working with his hands, but his eyes were sharp as a blade when he looked up at me. "You look like someone who got struck by lightning and lived to tell about it," he said by way of greeting. "Close enough." I unlocked the front door and held it open for him. "Coffee's on me this morning. We need to talk." Inside, the familiar smell of electrical components and machine oil provided a strange comfort. This place was mine, really mine, in a way the house had never been. Every wire, every tool, every invoice bore my fingerprints. Maren had never shown much interest in the business beyond the monthly profit statements. Samantha Torres looked up from her desk as we walked in, her dark eyes immediately reading the tension in my posture. At 28, Sam had been running our office operations for 3 years with the efficiency of a Swiss watch and the discretion of a priest. She knew where every penny went and where every job came from. "Morning, boss," she said carefully. "You look like you've been wrestling with live wires all night." "Something like that." I poured coffee for Doug and myself, then turned to face them both. "Maren filed for divorce yesterday. She wants everything except the kids." Doug's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "She what now?" "You heard right. House, business assets, savings, retirement accounts, the whole package. In exchange, I get full custody of Emma and Jake." Sam leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "That's unusual. Most mothers fight tooth and nail for custody rights. Most mothers don't have Eli Bowers whispering in their ear about freedom and new beginnings." I took a long sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. "She's moving in with him. Has been seeing him for months, apparently." "Eli Bowers, the real estate guy?" Doug's voice carried a note of recognition. "Slick piece of work, that one. Tried to lowball me on a wiring job last year, then acted like I should be grateful for the opportunity." "That's him? And now he's got my wife convinced that she can walk away from her responsibilities and start fresh." Sam was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming against her desk. "What are you going to do?" I looked around the office, at the awards on the wall, the photos of completed projects, the evidence of everything I'd built from nothing. "I'm going to give her exactly what she's asking for." Doug raised an eyebrow. "Come again?" "She wants everything? She can have it. Every last penny, every asset, every piece of property." I smiled, and it felt like ice cracking. "But first, I'm going to make sure she understands exactly what she's trading away." "Boss," Sam said slowly, "what aren't you telling us?" I walked to the window overlooking the parking lot, where Maren's silver SUV sat in its usual spot. She'd driven it here this morning to collect some things from the office, though I suspected she was really here to gauge my reaction to her bombshell. "Tell me, Sam, do you still have access to the school district's security portal, the one they gave us when we did the camera installation project?" "Of course. Why?" "And Doug, you still keep in touch with your buddy at the parking authority, the one who helped us get those permits for the downtown job?" "Yeah, but what's this got to do with—" Doug stopped mid-sentence, understanding dawning in his eyes. Oh, you sneaky son of a gun." I turned back to face them, feeling the first stirrings of something that might have been hope. "Maren thinks she's been careful, but she's forgotten something important about living with an electrical contractor." "What's that?" Sam asked. "We know how to trace every circuit back to its source." The next few days passed in a blur of careful preparation and quiet observation. I moved through the motions of normal life, making breakfast for Emma and Jake, driving them to school, handling the daily operations of Ardell Electric, while underneath, my mind worked like a circuit diagram, mapping connections and calculating loads. Maren, meanwhile, seemed almost giddy with her newfound freedom. She'd taken 3 personal days from her job at the marketing firm, ostensibly to handle the transition, but I knew she was spending the time at Eli's condo planning their future together. She came home only to pack clothes and personal items, treating me with the distant politeness of a hotel guest. "The kids seem to be handling this well," she said on Thursday evening, loading a suitcase into her SUV. "I think they understand that sometimes people grow apart." I watched her from the front porch, noting how carefully she avoided eye contact. "They're resilient. They get that from their mother." She paused, perhaps hearing something in my tone that made her look up. "Trent, I know this is hard, but it's better for everyone. We both know we haven't been happy for a long time." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "We haven't been happy. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe even guilt. But then her phone buzzed with a text message, and her attention shifted immediately to the screen. Her smile was soft and secretive as she typed back. "I should go," she said, closing the trunk. "Eli's making dinner?" "Of course he is. Give him my regards." After she left, I went inside and called Sam. "How's our research project coming along?" I asked. "Better than expected," she replied. "I've got the school security footage queued up for the past 3 months. Want to guess how many times your wife signed the kids out early for appointments that weren't on the family calendar?" "Surprise me." 14. Always on days when her parking app shows her at Eli's building. And here's the interesting part. The school's policy requires a secondary guardian to be present for early dismissals during school hours. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Please tell me you're not saying what I think you're saying." I'm saying that on 6 of those occasions, Eli Bowers signed as the secondary guardian, used his driver's license for identification and everything. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Maren hadn't just been having an affair, she'd been introducing our children to her lover, bringing them into his world without my knowledge or consent. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. Sam, I need you to document everything. Timestamps, photos, whatever you can get legally, and see if Doug's contact at Parking Authority can pull the access logs for Eli's building. Already on it, boss. Doug's buddy owes him a favor from that job we did on his brother's house. He's pulling the data tonight. Good. And Sam, keep this between us for now. I don't want Emma and Jake caught in the crossfire until I know exactly what we're dealing with. Understood, but Trent, be careful. This is starting to look like more than just a simple affair. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the divorce papers Maren had left on the counter. The language was straightforward enough. She wanted a clean break, a 50-50 split of all marital assets, and she was waiving any claim to custody or child support. Her lawyer had drawn up the documents with surgical precision, leaving no room for negotiation or reconsideration. What struck me was how quickly it had all been prepared. These weren't documents that had been thrown together overnight. The level of detail, the specific asset valuations, the carefully worded custody waiver, this had been in the works for weeks, maybe months. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Mrs. Cram's number appeared on the screen. "Hello, Eleanor," I said, accepting the call. "Trent, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling so late." Mrs. Cram was 73 and had lived next door to us for the past 6 years. She had the neighborhood's most comprehensive knowledge of everyone's business, a trait that had often annoyed me but now seemed potentially useful. "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "Well, I couldn't help but notice that Maren's been coming and going at unusual hours lately. And there was that man who came by yesterday afternoon while you were at work." I sat up straighter. "What man?" "Tall fellow, expensive car. He spent about an hour inside, helping Maren load boxes. They seemed quite familiar with each other." "Did you happen to see his license plate?" "Oh, I always notice license plates, dear. Force of habit from my days working at the DMV. It was a vanity plate. Bowers 1. Struck me as rather ostentatious. Eli had been in my house. In the home I'd worked 16-hour days to afford, touching my things, probably laughing with Maren about how easy this was all going to be. The violation felt personal in a way that surprised me with its intensity. "Mrs. Cram, I don't suppose you happened to take any pictures?" "Funny you should ask. I was testing out that new digital camera my grandson bought me. Took quite a few shots of the roses blooming by the fence. Might have caught some background activity by accident." I smiled for the first time in days. "Would you mind if I came over to take a look at those photos?" "I'll put the coffee on." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Mrs. Cram's immaculate living room, scrolling through photos on her camera's display screen. She hadn't been kidding about the background activity. She'd captured Eli's arrival, his time inside the house, and his departure with remarkable detail. "This one's particularly clear," she said, pointing to a shot that showed Eli loading what looked like my toolbox into his BMW. "I thought it was odd that Maren would be giving away your work equipment." The toolbox was a custom snap-on unit I'd bought myself as a Christmas present 3 years ago. It contained specialized electrical meters and testing equipment worth several $1,000s, tools that Maren had no right to give away and that Eli certainly had no legitimate use for. "Mrs. Cram, would you be willing to let me make copies of these photos?" "Of course, dear. Though I have to ask, is everything all right? I've seen enough divorces in my time to recognize the signs." I looked at this elderly woman who'd been nothing but a kind neighbor, who'd brought us cookies at Christmas and watched our house when we went on vacation. She deserved honesty. "Maren's leaving me for another man. She wants to take everything and leave me with the kids." Mrs. Cram's expression hardened. "And you're going to let her?" "I'm going to give her exactly what she's asking for," I said. "But first, I'm going to make sure she understands the full cost." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. "Your father was a good man, Trent. He raised you right. Sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences." As I drove home with copies of Mrs. Cram's photos, I felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place. This wasn't just about Maren wanting out of our marriage. This was about her and Eli systematically preparing to strip me of everything I'd worked for, while positioning themselves as the victims of an amicable divorce. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I would be too hurt, too overwhelmed, too focused on keeping my family together to pay attention to the details. They'd underestimated the methodical mind that had built Ardell Electric from nothing, the same mind that could trace a short circuit through miles of wiring to find the single loose connection causing the problem. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house that might not be mine much longer. Emma's bicycle was still lying on its side by the garage where she'd abandoned it after school. Jake's basketball sat deflated on the front steps, normal signs of childhood that felt precious and fragile in the face of what was coming. My phone buzzed with a text from Doug. Got the parking data. You're not going to like it, but you're going to love what we can do with it. Meet me at the office early tomorrow. I typed back, 6 a.m. Coffee's on me. As I walked toward the front door, I could see lights on in the kitchen. Maren was home, probably making herself a late dinner before heading back to Eli's for the night. The normalcy of it, the domestic routine we'd shared for 8 years, felt surreal given everything I now knew. She looked up as I entered, her expression carefully neutral. How was your evening? Educational, I replied, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. Yours? Fine. I had dinner with Eli. We're looking at houses tomorrow, something bigger with a better school district. The casual way she mentioned it, as if she were discussing weekend plans rather than dismantling our children's lives, crystallized something inside me. This wasn't grief anymore, or even anger. This was clarity. That sounds nice, I said. I hope you find what you're looking for. She seemed surprised by my lack of reaction. Trent, I know this is hard, but actually, it's not hard at all, I interrupted. You've made your choice, and I respect that. I'm going to sign those papers, Maren. You can have everything you want. Relief flooded her face. Really? You're not going to fight this? Why would I fight it? You've obviously thought this through carefully. You know what you want, and you're prepared to pay the price for it. I smiled, and something in my expression made her take a step back. The only question now is whether you really understand what that price is going to be. Before she could respond, I walked past her toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. Big day tomorrow. As I climbed the steps to our bedroom, soon to be just my bedroom, I could feel her watching me, probably trying to figure out why I was taking this so calmly. She'd expected tears, arguments, desperate pleas for reconciliation. Instead, she was getting the same methodical calm I brought to every complex problem. Because that's what this was, ultimately, a problem to be solved. And I'd been solving problems for a living long enough to know that the best solutions were always the ones nobody saw coming. Friday morning came crisp and clear, the kind of October day that made you believe in fresh starts and new possibilities. I arrived at Ardell Electric to find Doug's truck already in the lot, along with Sam's compact Honda. Through the office windows, I could see them hunched over Sam's computer, their faces lit by the glow of the monitor. Please tell me you've got good news, I said, pushing through the front door with coffee and donuts from the shop down the street. Define good, Doug said, accepting a cup gratefully. Because if you mean evidence that your wife and her boyfriend have been planning this for months, then yeah, we've got great news. Sam turned her monitor toward me, displaying a spreadsheet with dates, times, and location data. Doug's contact came through with the parking garage access logs. Look at this pattern. I studied the data, my trained eye immediately picking up the anomalies. She's been going there since March? That's 7 months. Gets better, Doug said grimly. Cross-reference those dates with the school pickup records, and you'll see that she's been bringing Emma and Jake to Eli's place at least twice a week since school started. The implications made my chest tighten. They've been living a double life. While I thought we were working through marital problems, they were already playing house. There's more. Sam pulled up another screen, this one showing bank records. I did some digging into publicly available property records. Guess who's been looking at houses in the Riverside School District since June? Let me guess. Maren and Eli shopping for their perfect family home. Bingo. And here's the kicker. They put an offer on a place 2 weeks ago. The mortgage application lists Maren as a co-borrower, with projected income from her share of Ardell Electric's assets. I stared at the screen, feeling pieces of the puzzle lock into place with mechanical precision. This wasn't a spontaneous decision driven by passion or unhappiness. This was a calculated business transaction, with my life's work serving as collateral for their new beginning. They've been planning to take me apart piece by piece, I said quietly. The affair, the divorce, the custody waiver. It's all designed to get me to sign away everything without a fight. Looks that way, Doug agreed. Question is, what are we going to do about it? I walked to the window overlooking the shop floor where 3 of my electricians were preparing for the day's jobs. Good men who depended on Ardell Electric for their livelihoods, who trusted me to build something stable and lasting. The thought of Maren and Eli dismantling this place to fund their fantasy life filled me with cold fury. We're going to give them exactly what they want, I said. But first, we're going to make sure they understand the full cost of their choices." Sam and Doug exchanged glances. "What did you have in mind?" Sam asked. "Phase 1 starts today. Maren's car is registered to this address for insurance purposes, right?" "Right. Has been since we got married. And the loan is in both our names, with the business listed as collateral." "Where are you going with this, boss?" Doug asked. I turned back to face them, feeling the familiar calm that came with having a plan. "I'm going to exercise my legal right to secure business assets that are currently at risk. Maren's car is collateral for a loan that she's about to default on by leaving the state." "You want to repossess her car?" Sam's eyebrows shot up. "I want to recover business property that's being misused. There's a difference." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. "Doug, how do you feel about a little field trip to Eli's condo complex?" "I feel like it's going to be educational." An hour later, we were parked outside Riverside Towers, the upscale complex where Eli lived and where Maren had been spending most of her time. The building was everything you'd expect from a successful real estate developer's home: glass and steel, manicured landscaping, and a parking garage that screamed exclusivity. Maren's silver SUV sat in a visitor's space, looking out of place among the BMWs and Mercedes. Through the windshield, I could see a parking permit that read, "Guest of E. Bowers, Unit 12A. "There's our smoking gun," Doug said. "She's been living here long enough to get a guest permit." I pulled out my phone and called the towing company we used for business vehicles. "This is Trent Ardell from Ardell Electric. I need to recover a company vehicle that's being misused by an employee. Can you have someone here in 30 minutes? While we waited for the tow truck, I called Maren. "Hey," she answered, her voice bright with artificial cheer. "What's up?" "I need you to bring your car back to the office. There's some paperwork I need to handle with the insurance company." "Can't it wait until Monday? I'm in the middle of something." "Afraid not. It's time sensitive." There was a pause, and I could hear Eli's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "Actually, I'm not at home right now. Can you just handle whatever it is without the car?" "Where are you, Maren?" Another pause, longer this time. I'm out with friends, shopping." "Interesting, because I'm looking at your car right now, parked outside Eli's building." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its artificial brightness. "What are you doing here, Trent?" "Recovering business property. The SUV is registered as collateral for the company line of credit. Since you're planning to leave the state and default on your obligations, I'm exercising my legal right to secure the asset." "You can't just take my car." "Actually, I can. Check the loan documents you signed 3 years ago, the ones where you agreed that the vehicle could be recovered if it was being used in a manner that jeopardized the business." I could hear her talking frantically to Eli, their voices rising in what sounded like an argument. "This is harassment, Trent. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do. And while you're at it, ask him to explain the legal implications of using business assets to facilitate an extramarital relationship. I think you'll find the conversation illuminating." The tow truck rounded the corner as I hung up, its driver already positioning to hook up the SUV. Doug and I stood nearby, officially supervising the recovery of business property while a small crowd of residents gathered to watch. "Is that really legal?" Sam asked over the phone. I'd called her to coordinate the next phase of our operation. "Completely. The loan agreement gives the business the right to recover the vehicle if it's being misused or if the borrower is in default. Maren's planning to move out of state constitutes a material change in circumstances." "And the fact that she's been living with another man? Just makes it easier to prove that she's been acting in bad faith." As the tow truck pulled away with Maren's SUV, I saw movement in the windows of Unit 12A. 2 figures silhouetted against the glass, watching their carefully laid plans encounter their first real obstacle. My phone rang immediately. "Bring back my car, right now," Maren said without preamble, her voice shaking with rage. "Your car is being stored at Ardell Electric's secure facility pending resolution of the loan default. You can retrieve it once you've satisfied the outstanding obligations." "What obligations? The loan payments are current." "The obligation to use the vehicle in a manner consistent with the loan agreement. The obligation not to use business assets to facilitate activities that could damage the company's reputation. The obligation to notify the lender of any material changes in your living situation." "This is insane. You're acting like a crazy person." "I'm acting like a businessman protecting his interests. There's a difference." I could hear Eli in the background, his voice getting louder and more agitated. After a moment, he apparently took the phone from Maren. "Listen here, you pathetic piece of—" "Mr. Bowers," I interrupted calmly. "I'd be very careful about making threats over a recorded phone line, especially when you're already in a legally questionable position." "What's that supposed to mean?" It means that a married woman using her husband's business assets to facilitate an affair could be considered fraud, depending on how aggressively someone wanted to pursue it. It means that interfering with a marriage could have civil liability implications. It means that you might want to think very carefully about how much deeper you want to dig this hole. The line went quiet for a moment. When Eli spoke again, his voice was more controlled, but no less hostile. You can't intimidate us, Ardell. Maren's leaving you, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Maren can leave any time she wants. She can file for divorce, she can move in with you, she can start a new life, but she's going to do it without using my assets to make it happen. We'll see about that. Yes, I said, watching the tow truck disappear around the corner. We certainly will. After I hung up, Doug clapped me on the shoulder. That felt good, didn't it? It felt like the beginning, I replied. Come on, we've got more work to do. As we drove back to the office, I could feel the momentum building. For months, I'd been reacting to Maren's choices, trying to save a marriage that was already over, fighting to keep a family together that she'd been systematically dismantling. Now, for the first time, I was setting the terms of engagement. But this was just the opening move. The real game was yet to begin. By Monday morning, word of the car repossession had apparently spread through Maren's social circle like electricity through a conductor. My phone had been buzzing all weekend with calls from her friends, her sister, and finally her lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Wells who specialized in amicable divorces. Mr. Ardell, Wells said when I finally answered her call. I think we need to have a conversation about your recent actions regarding the vehicle. I'm always happy to discuss business matters with legal counsel, I replied, settling into my office chair. What can I do for you? You can return my client's car immediately and stop this harassment campaign. Harassment is a strong word, Ms. Wells. I prefer to think of it as asset protection. The vehicle in question is collateral for a business loan that your client is about to default on. Mrs. Ardell has never missed a payment on that loan. Mrs. Ardell has materially violated the terms of the loan agreement by using the vehicle to facilitate activities that could damage the business reputation and by failing to notify the lender of her change in living arrangements. There was a pause while Wells presumably consulted her notes. What change in living arrangements? Your client has been living with another man for the past 7 months while using business assets to maintain the relationship. I have documentation of her presence at his residence, including parking records and photographic evidence. That's completely irrelevant to the loan agreement. Actually, it's directly relevant. The loan agreement specifically states that the vehicle must be used in a manner consistent with the borrower's obligations to the business. Using it to conduct an extramarital affair while planning to liquidate the business assets falls well outside those parameters. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Ardell, my client is prepared to be very generous in the divorce settlement. She's asking for a simple 50-50 split and waiving all custody claims. That's an extremely favorable arrangement for you. And I'm prepared to accept it, I said, just as soon as we resolve the outstanding issues with the misuse of business assets. What would it take to resolve those issues? I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Full disclosure of all activities involving business property, complete transparency about the timeline of your client's relationship with Mr. Bowers, and a guarantee that no business assets will be used to facilitate their ongoing relationship. That's completely unreasonable. Is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like your client has been conducting a systematic campaign to defraud the business while planning to liquidate its assets. The car repossession is just the beginning of what could become a very thorough investigation. Wells was quiet for nearly a minute. When she spoke again, her tone was more conciliatory. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that your client come clean about what she's been doing and accept responsibility for her choices. I'm proposing that she stop pretending this is an amicable divorce and acknowledge that she's been planning to strip mine my life's work to fund her new relationship. And if she does that, then we can discuss the return of the vehicle and proceed with the divorce as originally planned. I'll need to consult with my client. Of course, but Ms. Wells, you might want to advise your client that every day she delays, I discover new information about her activities, information that could be relevant to the divorce proceedings. After I hung up, Sam knocked on my office door. The school district called, she said. They want to schedule a meeting about Emma and Jake's enrollment for next year. What kind of meeting? Apparently, someone contacted them about a possible change in custody arrangements and a potential move to a different district. They want to make sure all the paperwork is in order. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Someone contacted them. Who? They wouldn't say over the phone, but they mentioned that the inquiry came from someone claiming to represent the children's interests in an upcoming custody proceeding. The implications hit me immediately. Maren and Eli weren't just planning to take my assets. They were already positioning themselves as the children's primary guardians, despite her legal waiver of custody rights. "Set up the meeting," I said. "And Sam, call our lawyer. I think we're going to need him." The meeting with the school district was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. In the meantime, I decided it was time to have a direct conversation with the children about what was happening. Emma, at 10, was old enough to understand that her parents' marriage was ending. Jake, at 7, knew something was wrong but hadn't been able to articulate what. I found them in the living room after school on Tuesday, Emma helping Jake with his homework while I made dinner. "Hey guys," I said, sitting down on the couch beside them. "I need to talk to you about some changes that are happening in our family." Emma looked up from Jake's math worksheet, her expression serious beyond her years. "Is it about Mom and her new boyfriend?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. "What do you know about Mom's boyfriend?" "His name is Eli," Jake said matter-of-factly. "He has a really nice apartment with a swimming pool. Mom says we might get to live there sometimes." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "When did Mom tell you that?" "Last week," Emma said. "She said you and her were getting divorced, but that it was okay because we'd get to have 2 houses instead of 1. The casual way they discussed it, as if it were a done deal, as if my opinion didn't matter, crystallized everything I'd been feeling for the past week. Maren hadn't just been planning to leave me. She'd been preparing the children for a life that assumed I would simply accept whatever arrangement she decided was best. "What do you think about that?" I asked carefully. Emma shrugged. "I guess it's okay. But I like our house, and I don't really like Eli very much." "Why not?" "He talks to us like we're babies, and he's always touching Mom when we're around, which is gross." Jake nodded emphatically. "And he said we'd have to change schools if we lived with them. I don't want to change schools." I pulled both kids closer to me, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Whatever happened between Maren and me, these 2 innocent lives hung in the balance. "Listen to me," I said. "No matter what happens with the divorce, you're going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of that." "Are you going to fight Mom in court?" Emma asked. "I'm going to make sure that whatever happens is best for you and Jake. That's my job as your dad." "Good," Jake said simply, "because I want to stay here with you." That evening, after the kids were in bed, I called Mrs. Cram. "Eleanor, I need to ask you a favor. A big one." "Of course, dear. What can I do?" "I need you to document everything you see happening at my house. Every visitor, every time Maren comes and goes, every interaction with the children. Can you do that for me?" "Already am, dear. Started the day after our conversation last week. I have quite a collection of photos and notes." "Would you be willing to share those with my lawyer if necessary?" "Absolutely. That woman has no business dragging those children through this mess." "Thank you, Eleanor. I can't tell you how much this means to me." "Don't mention it. Your father was a good man, and you're cut from the same cloth. Sometimes good people need help fighting back against those who would take advantage of their decency." Wednesday's meeting at the school district offices was illuminating in ways I hadn't expected. The administrator who met with me, a middle-aged woman named Janet Morrison, had a thick file of documentation spread across her desk. "Mr. Ardell," she began, "we've received some conflicting information about your children's living arrangements for next year. Can you help clarify the situation?" "What kind of conflicting information?" "Well, we have enrollment paperwork for Emma and Jake at Riverside Elementary, filed by someone claiming to be their guardian. But we also have your children currently enrolled here, with no indication of any custody changes." She showed me the Riverside enrollment forms, and my chest tightened as I read them. Maren had listed herself as the primary guardian, with Eli Bowers listed as the secondary contact. My name appeared nowhere on the forms. "When were these filed?" I asked. 3 weeks ago. The person who filed them said that custody arrangements were being finalized and that the children would be moving to the Riverside district after the holidays. "Ms. Morrison, I need you to understand something very clearly. I have full physical custody of Emma and Jake. Their mother has waived all custody rights in the divorce proceedings. No one has the legal authority to enroll them in another school without my consent." Morrison's expression grew concerned. "Do you have documentation of the custody arrangement?" I pulled out copies of the divorce papers, pointing to the section where Maren had explicitly waived custody. "Right here. She wants no responsibility for the children." "Then who filed the Riverside paperwork? Someone who doesn't have the legal right to make decisions about my children's education?" Morrison studied the documents for several minutes, then picked up her phone. "I need to make some calls. This is a very serious matter." As I drove home from the meeting, my phone rang. Maren's number appeared on the screen. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Meet me at the house tonight after the kids are asleep. Fine, 8 o'clock. And Trent, bring your checkbook. It's time to settle this thing once and for all. I hung up, feeling the pieces of her strategy finally becoming clear. The school enrollment, the custody positioning, the pressure from her lawyer, it was all designed to force me into a corner where I'd have to choose between a prolonged legal battle and simply paying her to go away. But she'd made one crucial miscalculation. She'd assumed that I would prioritize peace over justice, that I would choose the easy path over the right one. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Maren arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, her demeanor a carefully constructed blend of determination and false regret. She dressed for the occasion, professional but approachable, the same outfit she wore to parent-teacher conferences when she wanted to project competent motherhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, settling into the kitchen chair she'd occupied for 8 years of marriage. "I think we can resolve this whole situation tonight." "I'm sure you do." I poured myself coffee, but didn't offer her any. Small gestures of hospitality felt inappropriate given the circumstances. "Trent, I know you're hurt and angry, but dragging this out isn't good for anyone, especially not for Emma and Jake." "Interesting that you're suddenly concerned about what's good for the children." Her composure flickered for just a moment. "I've always been concerned about the children. That's why I'm willing to walk away from custody, because I know they're better off with you. Or because Eli doesn't want the responsibility of raising another man's kids. That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been planning this exit strategy for months while using my assets to finance your new life. The car, the house shopping, the school enrollment. You've been systematically preparing to strip me of everything while positioning yourself as the reasonable party." Maren's mask slipped entirely. "You repossessed my car, Trent. You humiliated me in front of the entire building. I recovered business property that was being misused. There's a difference. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're being vindictive and petty, and it's going to hurt everyone involved." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Tell me about the school enrollment forms." "What about them?" "The ones you filed at Riverside Elementary without my knowledge or consent. The ones that list Eli as a guardian for my children." Her face went pale. "How did you find out?" "Because unlike you, I actually pay attention to what happens in my children's lives. Because I talk to them, and they tell me about the promises you've been making regarding their future living arrangements." "I was just exploring options." "You were laying groundwork for a custody fight you legally waived the right to have. You were positioning Eli as a parental figure without consulting the children's actual father." Maren stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the backyard where Emma and Jake's swing set stood silhouetted against the evening sky. "Fine. You want the truth? Eli and I have been planning this for months. We've been looking at houses, researching schools, building a life together, and yes, we hoped that eventually you'd see that the children would be better off in a stable, two-parent home. A stable home with a mother who abandons her kids and a stepfather they barely know. A home without constant fighting and resentment. A home where people actually want to be together." I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. There it is. The real truth. You don't want to be here, so you assume no one else does either. Don't you see how miserable we've all been? Don't you want something better? I wanted my wife to honor her commitments. I wanted my children to grow up in an intact family. I wanted the woman I married to remember why she married me in the first place. People change, Trent. People grow apart. No, Maren. People make choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie to me for 7 months. You chose to involve our children in your deception. You chose to try to steal my life's work to fund your escape." She turned from the window, her eyes bright with tears that might have been genuine. "What do you want from me? You want me to grovel? You want me to pretend I'm sorry for finding someone who makes me happy? I want you to accept responsibility for your choices without trying to destroy me in the process. And then what? You'll just let me go?" I stood up, walking to the kitchen counter where the divorce papers lay in their manila envelope. "I'm going to sign these papers, Maren. I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. A 50-50 split of all assets, no custody obligations, a clean break." Relief flooded her face. "Really? Really? But first, you're going to understand exactly what you're trading away." "What's that supposed to mean?" I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of photos Mrs. Cram had taken. "It means you're going to see what 7 months of deception looks like from the outside." I showed her the images. Eli loading my tools into his car, the two of them embracing in my driveway, her sneaking out at dawn while the children slept. Each photo was time-stamped and dated, creating a chronological record of her double life. You've been watching me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've been documenting the systematic theft of my property and the endangerment of my children. There's a difference. Those photos prove nothing illegal. Don't they? Let's see what your lawyer thinks about the images of you giving away business property without authorization. Let's see what the family court thinks about you bringing our children to your lover's apartment during school hours." I pulled up the parking garage access logs on my phone. 7 months of documented visits, Maren, cross-referenced with school pickup records and attendance reports. You've been using our children as props in your affair. That's not... I never endangered them. You signed them out of school early 14 times to take them to Eli's apartment. You listed him as their guardian on enrollment forms for a different school district. You've been preparing them for a life that assumes I'll simply disappear. Maren sank back into her chair, the weight of the evidence finally hitting her. What are you going to do with all this? That depends on you. What do you mean? I mean that you have a choice to make. You can accept the divorce settlement as originally written, 50-50 split, no custody, clean break, or you can try to fight me for more, in which case all of this evidence becomes part of the public record. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you the same deal you offered me. Take it or leave it. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, her face was streaked with tears. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way. The question now is what you're going to do about it. If I sign the papers as written, you'll keep the evidence private? If you sign the papers, honor the custody arrangement, and stop interfering with my relationship with the children, then yes, this stays between us. And if I don't, then you'll discover that I can be just as methodical about destroying your reputation as you were about destroying our marriage. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's not who you are, Trent. You're not vindictive. You're right. I'm not vindictive, but I am protective, and I will do whatever it takes to protect my children from the consequences of your choices. Maren wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I need to think about this. No, you don't. You need to decide. Right now. Tonight. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you asking for a divorce before you started your affair. Fair would have been you being honest about your relationship with Eli instead of lying for 7 months. Fair would have been you considering the impact on our children before you started making promises about their future. I pulled the divorce papers from their envelope and set them on the table between us. Sign them, Maren. Take your 50% and start your new life. But do it without trying to take my children or my business with you. She stared at the papers for nearly 5 minutes, her internal struggle playing out across her face. Finally, she picked up a pen from the table. You'll really keep this private? As long as you honor the agreement and stay out of my life. She signed her name with quick, decisive strokes, as if prolonging the moment would make it harder. When she finished, she pushed the papers back across the table. There, it's done. Not quite. I picked up my phone and called Patricia Wells. Miss Wells, this is Trent Ardell. My wife has signed the divorce papers. We'll be filing them tomorrow morning. Yes, exactly as originally written. No, there won't be any additional negotiations. When I hung up, Maren was already standing, gathering her purse and jacket. I'll need to get my things from the house. You can pick them up this weekend when the kids are at my sister's. I'll leave the spare key under the planter. She paused at the kitchen door, looking back at the home we'd shared for 8 years. For what it's worth, I am sorry it ended this way. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the signed divorce papers that would legally end my marriage. The house felt different already. Not empty exactly, but lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying had finally been lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Doug. How did it go? I typed back, Phase 1 complete. Tomorrow we file the papers and start Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Making sure she understands that actions have consequences. I walked upstairs to check on Emma and Jake, both sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that their lives had just changed forever. Whatever came next, I would make sure they were protected. I would make sure they understood that some people could be counted on to keep their promises, even when others couldn't. But first, I had one more call to make. Mrs. Cram, it's Trent. I wanted to let you know that Maren signed the divorce papers tonight. Yes, everything went according to plan. Actually, there is one more thing I need your help with. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to need you to document something very important. As I hung up the phone, I felt the familiar calm that came with having a plan. Maren thought this was over, thought she could walk away clean with her 50% and her new life. She was about to learn that some lessons take longer to teach than others. The courthouse steps felt like a stage as I climbed them Thursday morning, the manila envelope containing our signed divorce papers tucked under my arm like a prop in some cosmic drama. The October air was sharp with the promise of winter, and the morning light cast long shadows across the granite facade of the building where my marriage would officially end. Patricia Wells was waiting inside, her expression professionally neutral as she reviewed the documents one final time. "Everything appears to be in order," she said, though her tone suggested she found the entire situation distasteful. "The 50-50 asset split, the custody waiver, the support arrangements, it's all exactly as originally drafted." "Good. When will the decree be final?" 30 days from filing, assuming no complications arise." "There won't be any complications." She studied my face for a moment, perhaps trying to read the calm determination she found there. "Mr. Ardell, I have to ask, are you certain you want to proceed with this arrangement? In my experience, men in your situation usually fight for a more favorable outcome." "Miss Wells, I'm getting exactly what I want out of this arrangement, which is justice." After filing the papers, I drove directly to Ardell Electric, where Sam and Doug were waiting with barely contained anticipation. The morning crew was already out on jobs, leaving the office quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic. "It's done," I announced, setting the file receipt on Sam's desk. 30 days from now, I'll be a free man." "And Maren gets half of everything," Doug said, shaking his head. "Still can't believe you're letting her walk away with that much." "She's not walking away with anything," I replied. "She's walking away to something. There's a difference." Sam looked up from her computer screen, where she'd been monitoring the business accounts. "Boss, you might want to see this." "What is it?" "Maren's lawyer just sent over the asset distribution paperwork. They want to liquidate the business accounts and split the cash rather than dividing the actual assets." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. "Of course they do. Eli's mortgage application probably requires liquid assets rather than business equity. So what do? We give them exactly what they're asking for." The next few hours were spent in careful preparation. I transferred exactly half of every business account into a separate escrow account, as required by the divorce agreement. I prepared detailed documentation of every asset, every liability, every outstanding obligation. And most importantly, I synchronized all of the evidence I'd been gathering into a single, comprehensive timeline. At exactly 2:12 p.m., my phone rang. "Trent, it's Patricia Wells. I'm calling on behalf of my client regarding the asset distribution." "What about it?" "She'd like to expedite the process. Complete the transfers today rather than waiting for the decree to be final." "That's fine with me, as long as all the documentation is properly filed." "Excellent. She'll be very pleased." "I'm sure she will. Ms. Wells, there is one small matter we need to address." "What's that?" "The children's school enrollment. Someone filed paperwork at Riverside Elementary using my children's names without my consent. That needs to be withdrawn immediately." There was a pause. I'll look into that." "Please do, because if it's not resolved by tomorrow, I'll be filing a complaint with the district attorney's office about fraudulent use of my children's identities." After I hung up, Doug looked at me with something approaching admiration. "You're really going to let her take half the money and walk away?" "Doug, let me ask you something. What's the most important thing about any electrical system?" "The circuit breaker. It protects everything downstream from overload." "Exactly. And what happens when you remove the circuit breaker from a system that's drawing too much power? Everything burns. Everything burns. That evening, I was helping Emma with her science homework when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see a black BMW in the driveway, Eli's car. He stood on my front porch, his posture radiating the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from believing you've already won. "Stay in the kitchen with Jake," I told Emma. "I need to handle something." I opened the front door but didn't invite him in. "What can I do for you, Eli?" "We need to talk." "No, we really don't." "Look, I know you're upset about Maren, but this doesn't have to be complicated. She's made her choice and you've made yours. Let's just move forward like adults." "I am moving forward. You're the one standing on my porch." He shifted his weight, trying to project casual dominance. "The thing is, Trent, I think there might be some confusion about the asset distribution. Maren seems to think you've been hiding money or property that should be included in the settlement." "Really? What kind of property?" "Business assets, equipment, maybe some cash accounts that weren't properly disclosed." I leaned against the doorframe, studying his face. "Are you accusing me of fraud, Eli?" "I'm just saying that if there are any discrepancies in the financial disclosure, it would be better to resolve them now rather than later. And if I don't?" Then we might have to involve the authorities. Financial fraud in a divorce proceeding is a serious crime. I smiled, and something in my expression made him take a step back. You know what, Eli? You're absolutely right. There are some discrepancies that need to be resolved. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Oh, we understand each other perfectly. The question is whether you understand the situation you've gotten yourself into. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence I'd been compiling. It means that while you've been planning your new life with my wife, I've been documenting every step of your relationship, every meeting, every transaction, every time you've used my property or involved my children in your affair. His face went pale as I scrolled through the photos, the parking records, the school documentation. This is harassment. No, this is evidence. Evidence of adultery, evidence of fraud, evidence of child endangerment, evidence that could be very useful in a variety of legal proceedings. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Because I've got 7 months of documentation showing that you and Maren have been systematically planning to defraud me while using my children as pawns in your scheme. I showed him the photo of him loading my tools into his car. That's theft of business property. The school enrollment forms with your name listed as a guardian, that's fraud and identity theft involving minors. Those tools were a gift? From a married woman using her husband's property without consent. That's not a gift, Eli. That's receiving stolen goods. He tried to maintain his composure, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to realize that the woman you've been planning a life with has been lying to everyone, including you. What are you talking about? I pulled up the timeline Sam had created, showing the correlation between Maren's visits to his apartment and her children's school absences. Did you know that Maren has been bringing Emma and Jake to your place during school hours? Did you know that she's been signing them out early, using you as a guardian reference, all while lying to me about their whereabouts? His face went from pale to ashen. She said they were sick. 14 times in 3 months. Either my children have serious health problems, or your girlfriend has been using them as an excuse to spend time with you. I didn't know? Of course you didn't. Because Maren doesn't tell anyone the whole truth. Not me, not you, not her lawyer. She tells everyone just enough to get what she wants. I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, the first cracks in the foundation of whatever fantasy he'd been building. Here's what's going to happen, Eli. You're going to go back to your apartment and wait for Maren to move in. You're going to marry her, buy that house in Riverside, and live happily ever after. And you're going to do it with exactly half of my assets and none of my children. And if I don't? Then all of this evidence becomes part of the public record. Your business partners get to see photos of you stealing from a client's home. Your neighbors get to read about your relationship with a married woman who endangers her children. Your mortgage company gets to review documentation showing that your co-borrower committed fraud to qualify for the loan. He stared at me for a long moment, perhaps finally understanding the depth of the trap he'd walked into. You're insane. No, I'm thorough. There's a difference. After he left, I went back inside to find Emma and Jake watching television in the living room, their homework forgotten in favor of a nature documentary about wolves. Who was that man, Dad? Emma asked. Someone who needed to learn an important lesson about consequences. What kind of consequences? I sat down between them on the couch, pulling them close. The kind that happen when people make selfish choices without thinking about how they affect others. Like when Mom decided to move out? Exactly like that. Jake looked up at me with serious 7-year-old eyes. Are we going to be okay, Dad? We're going to be better than okay, I promised. We're going to be exactly where we belong. The next morning brought the final piece of the puzzle. Patricia Wells called at 8 a.m., her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Mr. Ardell, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The asset distribution. There seems to be some confusion about the business valuation. What kind of confusion? Well, when we calculated the 50-50 split, we based it on the gross assets of Ardell Electric, but it appears that the business has significant outstanding liabilities that weren't fully disclosed. I smiled, settling into my office chair with my morning coffee. What kind of liabilities? Equipment loans, supplier credits, outstanding contracts with penalty clauses. It appears that the net value of the business is significantly less than the gross assets. That's correct. The divorce agreement called for a 50-50 split of assets, not net worth. Maren gets half of everything, including half of all outstanding debts and obligations. But that means your client is now responsible for approximately $200,000 in business liabilities, along with her share of the liquid assets. The math works out to roughly $30,000 in actual value, minus her legal fees. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. Mr. Ardell, this is completely unacceptable. My client was clearly misled about the true value of the marital assets. Your client received exactly what she asked for, a 50-50 split with no custody obligations. The fact that she didn't bother to understand what she was asking for is not my problem. We'll fight this in court. With what evidence? Your client waived the right to discovery. She demanded an expedited settlement. She specifically requested liquidation of assets rather than a detailed valuation. Everything was done exactly according to her specifications. This is fraud. No, Ms. Wells, this is exactly what your client ordered. She wanted everything except the children. Now she has everything, including all the responsibilities that come with business ownership. After I hung up, Sam knocked on my office door. The transfers are complete, she said. Maren now owns exactly half of Ardell Electric, including half of all outstanding obligations. And the business can continue operating? Absolutely. The liability split actually improves our cash flow position. We're in better shape now than we were 6 months ago. Doug appeared in the doorway behind Sam, grinning like a man who just watched his favorite team win the championship. Boss, you might want to see this. He handed me his phone, which displayed a local news website. The headline read, Local real estate developer under investigation for mortgage fraud. Seems like Eli's business partners weren't too happy when they found out about his creative financing arrangements, Doug explained. Amazing how quickly these things unravel once people start asking questions. I scrolled through the article, noting the details about falsified income statements, undisclosed relationships, and questionable asset valuations. All perfectly legal information that had somehow found its way to the right reporters at exactly the right time. Any idea how the press got hold of this information? I asked innocently. No idea at all, Doug replied, his grin widening. But I hear that mortgage fraud investigations can take years to resolve. Makes it real hard to close on new property during that time. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. This isn't over. M. I typed back. Actually, it is over. Exactly 30 days from now, when the divorce decree becomes final. Enjoy your new life. As I put the phone away, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt genuinely at peace. Not because I'd won, though I had, but because justice had been served. Maren had gotten exactly what she'd asked for, and she would spend the next several years learning what that actually meant. The children would stay with me in the home they'd always known, attending the school where they had friends and teachers who cared about them. Ardell Electric would continue to grow and prosper, providing jobs for good people who deserved stability. And somewhere across town, in a luxury condo that was about to become much less affordable, two people who had built their relationship on deception and selfishness were discovering that actions truly do have consequences. Some circuits, once broken, can never be repaired, but sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen for the system to work properly again. The intercom buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. Boss? Sam's voice crackled through the speaker. Emma's school is online too. Something about enrollment forms being withdrawn from another district. I picked up the phone, already knowing what I would hear. The Riverside Elementary paperwork had been quietly withdrawn. The mortgage application had been suspended pending investigation. The carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing exactly as I'd known it would. Mr. Ardell? The school administrator's voice was professionally cheerful. I just wanted to confirm that your children will be remaining in our district for the remainder of the school year. That's correct. Emma and Jake will be staying exactly where they belong. Excellent. We're so glad to have them. As I hung up the phone, I looked out my office window at the city where I'd built my business and raised my family. The morning sun was burning through the October clouds, casting everything in sharp, clear light. Some stories end with reconciliation and forgiveness. Others end with justice and consequences. This one ended exactly as it should have, with the truth finally coming to light, and everyone getting exactly what they deserved.